Hey everyone, I want to start today's talk about the year 2000's presidential election way outside the confines of our usual discussions in this course. I want to ask you, have you ever seen a little movie called The Blair Witch Project? It's terrifying, singularly terrifying, although I'm a little bit of a fraidy cat, so most movies scare me, but this one more than most. But the reason I'm talking to you about this movie in the context of the 2000 election is not because I was personally terrified of it and it impacted my vote or something like that. But instead, this is a movie that was labeled an insurgent movie at the time. And that's the key phrase for today, insurgent, and it applied to insurgent campaigns. But this was an insurgent movie. Reasons why was it was wildly underfunded. It had a budget initially of like $25,000. Then when a major studio got a hold of it, they put in what for them is a paltry sum of money, about $500,000 for a major studio. And then it ends up grossing $250 million worldwide over the course of its lifetime. And so it starts with this kind of small budget, this little dream, and it threatens to redefine a genre. It becomes a movie of the year and then spawns many, many pretenders afterwards, and horror movies afterwards become, in a sense, a series of references in a way to that groundbreaking performance. And so it goes way beyond what is initially as expected. There's a corollary amongst presidential campaigns, and that's what I want to talk about today with the year 2000. So typically what we're going to do when we have these year-by-year campaign breakdowns is I will pick a historically important theme from that year, and usually that theme involves the two major candidates, whether it's Bush and Gore in 2000, or Kennedy and Nixon in 1960, and so what have you. But not all the time. Sometimes what is most interesting in terms of a historical perspective for a course on presidential campaigning and rhetoric and communication is from one of the also-ran candidates, and that's the case in 2000. So today's lecture is going to say very little about Bush and I think nothing about Al Gore. Instead, we're going to focus on the insurgent campaign in the year 2000 of John McCain. John McCain's campaign in the year 2000 was like nothing before and perhaps nothing since. John McCain's campaign bus, the Straight Talk Express, was then a total novelty. He opened his campaign, it was really multiple buses. He opened the campaign bus to any and every reporter that wanted to come. He had no licensing agreements in terms of what reporters could ask what and when. There was none of this scheduled time where reporters would just get to ask a couple little questions, and then McCain's handlers would say that this question's out of bounds and this question's out of bounds and only questions on these topics. McCain was open and honest in terms of taking any and all questions. Moreover, all of his speech, his campaign events were scheduled as town hall formats, and they specifically did not pre-screen any of the questioners. And so he could get questions about UFOs, which he got a lot, or he could get questions about the national debt or his military service or anything under the sun that any voter who grabbed the microphone would want to ask him. And so where many campaigns have this kind of stage managed, scripted, fear the spontaneous reactions, they fear the gaffe, they fear the misquoted moment that ends up in somebody else's smear campaign. It was almost as if McCain was walking right into it, and in doing so, he inspired voters, many of whom who didn't agree with his policy positions, because he seemed like the first real, authentic campaigner in nearly a generation. And so here today, we were going to talk about McCain's 2000 campaign, but not just his campaign. We'll talk about it as an example of a historic phenomenon called insurgent campaigns in the modern era of American politics.